The city never slept, especially not when it came to Ethan Cole, the 32-year-old CEO of Cole Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire. His name was enough to silence a boardroom, his stare cold enough to freeze the most confident employee mid-sentence. Ethan was known as the Iceman. He didn't believe in small talk, friendships, or, worst of all, love. To him, emotions were weaknesses, distractions that slowed progress. He had learned that lesson years ago when his fiancée, Madison, had left him for another man, his best friend at the time. Since then, Ethan had turned his pain into power. Every heartbreak became a dollar sign. Every betrayal became a reason to build higher walls around his heart. It was a chilly Monday morning in Manhattan when Lena Hart entered his life, quite literally crashing into it. The morning rush was brutal as always. Lena, 24, was juggling her coffee, phone, and a stack of resumes. After months of searching, she was headed to her final interview at Cole Enterprises, her dream company. She had graduated top of her class in architecture, but had spent a year struggling to find a stable job. Her landlord had already given her a final notice. She needed this job like air. She was running late, of course. Come on, she muttered, crossing the street as the light flashed red. At that exact moment, a sleek black car turned the corner, and splash! A wave of dirty street water drenched her entire outfit. "Oh my God!" she gasped, blinking through the cold mess. The car screeched to a halt, and a tall man in a tailored suit stepped out. His expression was unreadable, calm, composed, and yet intimidating. "Are you blind?" Lena snapped before she could stop herself. Ethan looked at her, his blue-gray eyes narrowing slightly. "You stepped in front of my car." "Yeah, well, maybe you shouldn't be driving like you own the road," she shot back, wringing out her soaked blazer. His lips curved slightly, not a smile, more like mild amusement. "I do own that road, actually. City permits. Construction project. But nice try." Lena blinked. "Wait, you're Ethan Cole?" He tilted his head, clearly enjoying her reaction. "I am. And you are." "Late for my interview, at your company," she muttered, cheeks turning crimson. Something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe. "Interesting start," he said quietly before getting back into his car. "You have 5 minutes. Don't be late again." Inside the glass towers of Cole Enterprises, Lena felt like an imposter. Everyone looked sharp, perfect, confident. She, meanwhile, looked like she had wrestled a rainstorm. Her hair clung to her face, her blouse was wrinkled, and her shoes squeaked with every step. Still, she kept her chin up. "You've got this," she told herself. "You've faced worse." When she entered the interview room, her heart nearly stopped. Sitting at the head of the table was none other than Ethan Cole himself. "Oh no," she whispered under her breath. He looked up from his laptop. "Miss Hart, I see you made it." "Yes, Mr. Cole. I apologize for earlier." "No need," he said coolly. "You were honest. Most people aren't." His tone was flat, but something in his gaze told her he wasn't entirely displeased. The other board members began asking her technical questions about design, structure, and architecture. Lena answered confidently, her passion lighting up her voice. She talked about sustainable design, about using space to build not just structures but stories. For the first time in years, Ethan actually listened. He had interviewed dozens of candidates that week, brilliant minds, impressive resumes, but none had spoken with the kind of warmth and conviction Lena had. Her ideas were idealistic, maybe even naive, but refreshing. When the interview ended, Ethan simply said, "We'll be in touch." She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for the opportunity." After she left, one of the managers leaned toward Ethan. "She's talented, but not exactly professional." She was late, underdressed, and unprepared. Ethan didn't look up from his notes. "Hire her." "What?" "I said hire her," Ethan repeated, standing. "Talent matters more than appearances." And just like that, Lena Hart became part of Cole Enterprises. The first few days were rough. Ethan barely acknowledged her existence. When he did, it was only to point out mistakes or demand revisions. His standards were impossibly high. The other employees whispered about him constantly. How he'd fired a manager for being 1 minute late, how he'd ended a deal worth millions just because someone lied about a small detail. Lena tried not to take it personally, but his coldness frustrated her. One afternoon, after he rejected her proposal for the third time, she finally snapped. "Mr. Cole, can I ask you something?" He looked up from his laptop. "If it's about your proposal, I've already explained why." "No, it's not that," she interrupted. "I just want to know, do you ever smile?" The room went silent. Ethan stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "I mean," she continued, nervous but determined, "you run one of the most powerful companies in New York, but you act like the world owes you something. What happened to you?" For a moment, she thought he'd fire her on the spot. But instead, he said quietly, "That's none of your business, Miss Hart." She swallowed hard. "Maybe not. But if you're trying to lead people, you might start by acting like a human being." He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then, without a word, he stood up and left the room. That night, Ethan found himself replaying her words in his head. Act like a human being. No one had ever spoken to him like that before, not since Madison. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared out at the city lights from his penthouse window. Somewhere down there, Lena Hart was probably working late, trying to prove herself. Something about her stubbornness reminded him of who he used to be, before the betrayal, before the walls, before the loneliness that had become his constant companion. He didn't believe in love anymore. But for the first time in years, he couldn't stop thinking about someone. And that scared him more than anything. The week after Lena's outburst passed in tense silence. She expected Ethan Cole to fire her any moment, maybe in front of everyone, just to make a point. But he didn't. He barely spoke to her. When he did, his tone was calm and precise, stripped of any emotion. It almost felt worse than being yelled at. But Lena wasn't one to give up easily. She had promised herself she'd prove her worth, no matter how hard it got. So, she stayed late at the office, revising blueprints, sketching new ideas, even researching projects from Cole Enterprises' past. Every time she walked by Ethan's office, though, she could feel his eyes on her, cool, analyzing, unreadable. Friday morning arrived with a surprising twist. "Miss Hart," Ethan said, stepping into her workspace. His voice made her freeze mid-keystroke. "Yes, Mr. Cole," she replied, trying to sound professional. "You're coming with me." She blinked. "Excuse me. I'm meeting a potential client for a luxury housing deal in the Hamptons. I need my design associate there to help present the model." "Me?" He raised a brow. "Do you see anyone else named Lena Hart in this office?" Her heart raced. "No, sir." "Good. Be downstairs in 10 minutes. And dress appropriately. We're meeting billionaires, not baristas." The drive to the Hamptons was long but beautiful. Ethan's black Mercedes glided down the highway, sunlight streaming through tinted windows. The radio played softly, though he didn't seem to notice. Lena sat stiffly beside him, clutching her tablet. The silence stretched until she finally spoke. "So, you always this quiet?" He glanced at her briefly. "I prefer thinking over talking." "Right. Because talking is emotional, and emotions are, what was the word? Weakness," she teased. He gave her a side glance. "You remember too much. I'm good with details." He almost smiled. Almost. The client meeting went surprisingly well. Lena presented her ideas with confidence, showing how the design incorporated natural light, ocean views, and sustainable materials. Ethan mostly observed, occasionally stepping in to discuss costs and logistics. After the presentation, the client, a wealthy investor named Mr. Harper, turned to Ethan. "You've got yourself quite a designer here. Smart choice." Ethan nodded slightly. "She's still learning." Lena smiled politely, but inside, she was irritated. Still learning. She'd carried the entire presentation. Later, as they left the meeting, she muttered under her breath, "You could have at least said thank you." "I don't thank people for doing their jobs," Ethan replied coolly. She glared at him. "You really are impossible." He didn't respond. But when she turned away, a small smirk tugged at his lips. Impossible, huh? He liked that she wasn't afraid to challenge him. Most people either feared him or flattered him. Lena did neither. The sun was setting as they drove back to the city. Traffic was heavy, and for the first time, Ethan seemed relaxed. "You handled yourself well today," he said finally. She turned to him, surprised. "Wait, was that a compliment?" He smirked. "Don't get used to it." They both laughed quietly, the tension melting a little. Moments later, the sky opened up, rain pouring down. Ethan frowned. "We'll have to stop for a while." He pulled into a small roadside cafe, the kind of cozy place with fairy lights, wooden tables, and the smell of fresh pie in the air. Inside, they found a corner booth. The waitress brought them coffee, and for once, Ethan looked less like the intimidating CEO and more like a man. "So, Mr. Cole," Lena said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug, "what's your story?" He looked up. "My story? Yeah. Everyone has one. What made you the way you are?" He stared at the rain outside for a long moment before replying quietly, "Experience." "That's vague." "Good." She rolled her eyes. "You really hate talking about yourself, don't you?" "I don't see the point. The past doesn't matter." "Of course it does," she argued. "It shapes who we become." He met her gaze, sharp, intense. "Then I guess my past made me someone who doesn't believe in love." Her breath caught. "Someone must have really hurt you." He didn't answer, just stared into his coffee. Lena softened. "For what it's worth, I don't think love makes you weak. I think it makes you human." For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe? Then it was gone, replaced by his usual mask. "Let's get back," he said, standing abruptly. Back in New York, things slowly began to change. Ethan started involving Lena in more projects, asking for her input, even defending her ideas in meetings. The office gossip spread fast. "Did you hear? The Iceman actually smiled yesterday. Lena must be some kind of magician." Lena ignored the whispers, but deep down, she knew something was shifting, in both of them. Ethan was still strict, but his tone had softened. Sometimes, she caught him looking at her with a strange expression, a mix of curiosity and something else she couldn't name. One evening, as she gathered her things to leave, Ethan appeared by her desk. "You work too late," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Says the man who sleeps at the office." "Touché." He hesitated, then added, "There's a gala tomorrow night. Company event. You're required to attend." "Oh, is that a rule?" "It is now." The next night, Lena walked into the luxury ballroom of the Empire Grand Hotel, wearing a navy blue dress that shimmered under the chandeliers. She looked nothing like the coffee-stained, rain-soaked girl Ethan had met weeks ago. When he saw her, even he couldn't hide his reaction. "You clean up well," he said, his voice lower than usual. She smiled. "So do you, Mr. Cole." Throughout the evening, they mingled with clients and investors, but their eyes often found each other across the room. As the band played a slow jazz number, Ethan unexpectedly extended his hand. "Dance with me." Lena hesitated, then took it. They moved together slowly, her hand resting against his shoulder, his touch careful, almost gentle. For the first time, the man who claimed he didn't believe in love looked uncertain. Vulnerable, even. "Careful," Lena teased softly. "Someone might think you have a heart." He looked down at her, eyes dark but soft. "Maybe someone's trying to prove that I do." Their eyes met, and in that quiet moment under the golden lights, something unspoken passed between them, something Ethan hadn't felt in years. It terrified him, because love was supposed to be his weakness. But standing there with Lena in his arms, it didn't feel weak at all. The Monday after the gala, Cole Enterprises was buzzing with new rumors. "Did you see how Mr. Cole danced with her?" whispered one employee. "They looked way too comfortable." Maybe the Iceman finally thawed. Lena tried to ignore the whispers as she typed away at her desk. She told herself it was just one dance, a professional courtesy. But deep down, her heart refused to believe that. She had seen it, the flicker of warmth in Ethan's eyes, the way his hand lingered on hers a second too long. That wasn't business. That was something else. Still, she reminded herself that Ethan Cole was her boss, the cold, unreadable CEO who didn't believe in love. So, when he walked past her office that morning, she kept her gaze glued to the computer screen. "Miss Hart," his voice came, smooth and steady. "My office. Now." Her pulse skipped. Oh great, what now? Inside his office, sunlight poured through the glass walls, glinting off the skyline behind him. Ethan stood near the window, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up, looking both powerful and strangely human. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, closing the door. He turned. "Yes. I reviewed your design for the Riverside project." She waited, nervous. He held up her sketches. "It's good." Lena blinked. "Good. Very good." She smiled before she could stop herself. "That means a lot, coming from you." He looked at her, really looked. "You've grown. You don't let pressure break you anymore. Maybe I had a good teacher." He smirked. "Flattery won't get you a raise." "Wasn't trying to," she said, laughing softly. For a moment, silence filled the room, not awkward, but charged. Then Ethan cleared his throat. "Anyway, I'm assigning you as the lead designer for this project. Congratulations." Her eyes widened. "Wait, seriously? Me?" "Yes." "Don't make me regret it." "I won't," she said, beaming. When she left his office, Ethan found himself smiling, a real, unguarded smile. Something about seeing her happy did things to him he couldn't explain. Over the next few weeks, they spent more time together than either expected. Long meetings turned into late-night work sessions, filled with quiet laughter, debates over design ideas, and the occasional shared cup of coffee. Ethan started noticing things: how Lena chewed her pen when she was deep in thought, how her laughter filled the room, how her eyes lit up when she talked about architecture. He caught himself looking at her too often. He caught himself caring. And that terrified him. Because love had betrayed him once. It had left scars that never fully healed. And he wouldn't, let it happen again. One rainy evening, they were working late on a presentation. The storm outside rumbled through the night, lightning flashing across the windows. "Power's flickering again," Lena murmured. "We should probably call it a night." Ethan didn't respond. He was staring at the model on the table, lost in thought. "Ethan," she said softly. It was the first time she'd called him by his first name. He looked up, startled. "What did you say?" She smiled slightly. "I said, Ethan. It's your name. You should try using it outside of contracts and signatures." He chuckled quietly. "I'm not used to people being that casual with me." "Well, get used to it," she said teasingly. Their eyes met again. A crack of thunder echoed outside, but neither of them moved. Something was happening, something both of them felt but neither dared to name. "Lena," Ethan began, his voice low. But before he could say anything more, the lights went out. The office was plunged into darkness. "Oh, perfect," Lena sighed. "Guess we're trapped." "Generator should kick in soon," Ethan said, though his tone was uncertain. She laughed softly. "You mean the one you've been too busy to replace for 3 months?" He frowned, but there was amusement in his eyes. "I'll take that as a note for tomorrow's agenda." They waited in the dark, the only light coming from a city skyline. After a while, Lena spoke again. "You know, you don't have to pretend all the time." He turned toward her. "Pretend what?" "That you're made of stone." He stayed silent. "You act like you don't care about anyone," she continued gently, "but I've seen you. You care more than you admit. You just hide it because you think it makes you weak." Her words hit deeper than she could have known. He exhaled slowly. "Caring gets you hurt, Lena." "Not caring hurts worse," she whispered. The generator finally hummed back to life, flooding the room with light, but neither of them moved. Ethan was still staring at her, eyes soft, conflicted. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she said, shaking her head. "It's terrifying. But it's worth it." He looked at her for a long time before murmuring, almost to himself, "I don't know if I can believe that again." Lena smiled faintly. "Then I'll just have to prove it to you." The next day, things were different. Ethan was quieter, distant, as if fighting something inside. At the same time, a new storm brewed outside the office walls. The board of directors had discovered that one of the company's regional managers had been embezzling funds, and the press was already digging for a scandal. The company's reputation was on the line. Cole Enterprises could lose millions, said Mr. Hargrove, the CFO, in a tense emergency meeting. We need to find a way to contain this before it hits the media. Ethan's jaw clenched. Who was responsible? Mark Dalton, Hargrove replied. Your old college friend. Ethan's expression turned to ice. Of course. Lena, sitting nearby, could see the pain behind his composure. It wasn't just business, it was personal. After the meeting, she approached him quietly. Are you okay? He didn't look up. Don't worry about me. Focus on the work. Ethan, you don't have to. I said drop it, he snapped. She flinched at his tone but didn't back away. Fine. But don't push everyone away just because you're hurting. He froze. Then softer, she added, You're not alone anymore. Her words lingered long after she left. Ethan stared out the window, the city lights blurring through the rain. He had spent years building walls so no one could get close enough to hurt him again. But Lena had found a way in. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure he wanted to stop her. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, loud, brutal, and merciless. Cole Enterprises under investigation for fraud. CEO Ethan Cole linked to illegal financial activity. Within hours, the headlines were everywhere, from television screens in cafes to glowing banners on Times Square. Ethan Cole's empire was burning. Inside the 47th floor conference room, the atmosphere was suffocating. Every major executive sat around the long table, their faces tense, avoiding Ethan's eyes. Cameras and reporters were already camped outside the building, waiting for blood. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his usual calm replaced by a cold fury. Who leaked this? No one answered. Who? His voice cracked like thunder. Mr. Hargrove, the CFO, swallowed hard. We don't know yet, sir. But the timing was deliberate. Right after Dalton's dismissal. Lena sat near the corner, heart pounding. She'd never seen him like this, his jaw tight, his eyes sharp, his control slipping. The board began murmuring, shifting blame, throwing out half-baked ideas. Someone even suggested Ethan step down temporarily for the sake of the company's image. He shot that idea down instantly. This is my company. I built it from the ground up. I'm not stepping down because of lies. But as the shouting grew, Lena could see something else behind his anger, hurt. Betrayal, once again. She'd seen that look before. That evening, Ethan shut himself in his office. The blinds were closed, the city lights muted behind glass. He hadn't spoken to anyone in hours. Lena stood outside his door, hesitant. Every instinct told her to leave him alone, but something stronger pushed her forward. She knocked gently. Ethan. No response. She turned the handle. It wasn't locked. Inside, he was sitting on the couch, tie loosened, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked nothing like the confident CEO she knew, just a man who'd spent too long fighting battles alone. Go home, Lena, he said quietly, not looking up. I'm not leaving. He sighed. You don't get it. This could ruin everything. My company. My reputation. Years of work, gone. Then we'll fix it, she said firmly. He laughed bitterly. You think this is your fight? It is now. Finally, he looked at her, his eyes cold but tired. Why? Why do you care so much? You barely know me. She hesitated. Because I see you, Ethan. Not the CEO. Not the headlines. You. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he set the glass down and stood, walking toward her slowly. Careful, Miss Hart, he said in a low voice. That sounds dangerously close to emotion. She smiled faintly. Maybe I'm not afraid of that. He stopped just inches away, the air between them heavy. You should be. But even as he said it, his hand brushed against hers, and neither of them moved away. The next few days were chaos. Ethan's schedule filled with meetings, investigations, and calls with lawyers. Rumors kept spreading, and several clients began withdrawing deals. Lena refused to stand by and watch him fall. She spent nights digging through company records, tracing transactions, comparing reports. And then, finally, she found something. A hidden account. One tied directly to Mark Dalton. The money trail proved that Dalton, not Ethan, had been funneling company funds offshore, using Ethan's digital signature, forged from old contracts. Lena's heart raced as she gathered the evidence. She couldn't believe it. This was the key to clearing Ethan's name. But she also knew what it meant. Someone inside the company had helped Dalton. That evening, she burst into Ethan's office, breathless. "I found it." He looked up from his laptop, exhausted. "Found what?" "Proof. You're innocent." She dropped a folder on his desk, pages covered with highlighted data. "Dalton used your signature to move money through a shell account. Look, this timestamp matches the day you were in Boston. You couldn't have done it." Ethan scanned the papers, disbelief turning to shock, and then to something softer. "Lena, this is..." He stopped, voice breaking slightly. "You did this." She nodded. "You taught me to look for details." For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then, unexpectedly, he stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice low, rough. "You have no idea what this means." Lena froze. His embrace was warm, real, human. She wanted to stay there forever. But then the door opened. It was Mr. Hargrove. His expression turned dark as he saw them. "Well, isn't this convenient?" Ethan let go immediately, straightening his jacket. "What do you want?" Hargrove smirked. "I know about your little discovery. And I also know it could make the company implode if released the wrong way. I'm giving you an option. Step down quietly, and I'll make sure this doesn't reach the press." Lena frowned. "You were working with Dalton, weren't you?" Hargrove's smirk vanished. "Careful, Miss Hart. You're way out of your depth." Ethan's tone turned ice-cold. "Get out of my office." "This isn't over," Hargrove warned, turning to leave. "You can't protect her forever, Cole." As the door closed behind him, Lena exhaled shakily. "Ethan, he's dangerous. If he knows I found that file." "He won't touch you," Ethan said firmly. "I promise." Later that night, they stayed at the office, preparing to hand the evidence over to the authorities in the morning. As they worked, Ethan glanced at her. "You risked everything for me. You could have lost your job." She shrugged softly. "Some things are worth the risk." He looked at her, his expression unreadable, a mix of admiration and something deeper. "You really don't make this easy for me," he said finally. "What do you mean?" "I've spent years building walls to make sure no one could ever hurt me again. And somehow, you keep finding the cracks." Lena smiled. "Maybe that's because you're not as cold as you pretend to be." He stepped closer. "And maybe you're more dangerous than you realize." Her breath caught. Their eyes met, two hearts that had no right to meet but couldn't stop colliding anyway. He hesitated, as if fighting himself, then whispered, "Lena!" But before he could finish, his phone buzzed sharply. He frowned, checking the message, his lawyer. His expression hardened instantly. The media got hold of the documents. "What? How?" "I don't know," he said grimly. "But someone leaked them before we could go public. And now, they're twisting everything." Lena's chest tightened. "Ethan, He looked up, eyes full of storm. "I told you this would happen. Caring only gets you hurt." Then he walked out, leaving her standing in the silence, heart shattered, tears threatening to fall. That night, as the storm raged outside once again, Lena sat alone in the empty office, staring at the city lights. Maybe he was right. Maybe love really did hurt. But she also knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to give up on him. Not now. Not ever. Because sometimes, even the coldest hearts just need someone brave enough to keep knocking. The storm that night didn't stop, not outside, and not in Ethan Cole's life. By morning, Every news outlet in America was tearing him apart. Ethan Cole betrays investors. Company stock plunges. Cole Enterprises collapses under fraud scandal. Reporters swarmed the building. Employees whispered in the halls. Some even cleared their desks, afraid the company wouldn't survive another week. Inside his office, Ethan stared out at the rain, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. The man who once controlled everything now looked like he'd lost it all. When Lena entered quietly, he didn't turn around. "Ethan," she said softly, "I know this looks bad, but we can still fix it." "There is no we, Lena." His voice was calm, but it cut through her like a blade. "You did what you could," he continued, still facing the window. "But this company is mine to lose." She stepped closer. "You don't have to push me away." "I do," he snapped, turning sharply. "You've done enough. The more you're around me, the worse it'll get. The press already saw those photos from last night. You'll get dragged into this too." Her chest tightened. "You think I care about that?" "You should." His voice broke on the word. "Because I do." For a second, silence. The rain outside filled the space between them. Then, quietly, he said, "You once told me love makes you human. But being human got me betrayed, twice. Once by someone I loved, and now by someone I trusted again." Her throat tightened. "You think I betrayed you? I don't know what to think anymore." She blinked back tears, forcing a small nod. "If that's what you want, I'll go." And then she did, walking out of the office with trembling hands, leaving Ethan alone with the walls he'd built long ago. Walls that suddenly felt more like a prison than protection. The following week was chaos. Cole Enterprises shares dropped nearly 60%. Clients backed out. The FBI began investigating. Ethan's face was everywhere, on screens, in headlines, in whispers. But through it all, he said nothing. No interviews. No press statements. He simply worked, like a machine trying to rebuild a burning city. Still, every time he passed Lena's empty desk, something inside him twisted. Her coffee mug still sat there, white porcelain with the words, "Dream Big," in gold letters. She hadn't come back. He told himself that was for the best. But every night, when he went home to his silent penthouse, the emptiness echoed louder than the city below. Meanwhile, Lena was across town in a tiny apartment, glued to her laptop. She had spent every hour digging deeper into the case, desperate to clear Ethan's name, not for the company, but for him. She knew he didn't believe in love. But she did. And she wasn't giving up. After a long night of research, she finally found something, a digital trail leading back to Hargrove's offshore accounts. He had manipulated data to make it look like Ethan approved Dalton's transfers. It was all there, emails, logs, everything. Her hands trembled as she realized what she was holding. Proof. But before she could celebrate, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find two men in suits. "Miss Hart?" one asked. "Yes." "You've been served." They handed her a letter, a legal notice. Her stomach dropped as she read the words. Defamation lawsuit, Cole Enterprises versus Lena Hart. "What?" she gasped. The men were already gone. Her eyes darted to the bottom of the letter. Signed, Ethan Cole. The next morning, she stormed into his office. Security tried to stop her, but one look from her and they stepped aside. Ethan was sitting behind his desk, buried in papers. He looked up, startled. "Lena! How could you?" she demanded, slamming the papers down. "A lawsuit. Against me." His eyes darkened. "You shouldn't have gone digging into private files." "I was trying to help you." "Help me," he repeated bitterly. "You've already helped enough. Every move you make puts this company in deeper trouble." "That's not true." He stood up, his tone sharp. "You leaked those files, Lena. You wanted to be the hero. Congratulations." Her jaw dropped. "You really think I'd do that to you?" He didn't answer. And that silence, that single moment of hesitation, broke her heart more than any words could. She took a deep breath, tears burning her eyes. "You know what's funny? I used to think you were cold because you were hurt. But now I see, you're cold because you choose to be. Lena. No. You don't get to say my name like that anymore. She turned and walked out, the door slamming behind her. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Cole felt something close to regret, and fear that he might have just destroyed the only person who ever saw the man behind the CEO. Days passed. Ethan tried to bury himself in work, but he couldn't focus. Every document blurred into the same thought: what if she was telling the truth? Finally, he called his IT director. Pull up the security access logs from the finance servers. I want to see who downloaded the documents before the leak. An hour later, the report landed on his desk. He scrolled down and froze. The access wasn't from Lena's computer. It was from Hargrove's. Every word she'd said was true. He sat there for a long moment, guilt crashing over him like a wave. He had accused her. He had broken her trust. And she had only ever tried to protect him. Without another thought, he grabbed his coat and ran out of the office, something no one had ever seen Ethan Cole do. He found her at the small park near her apartment, sitting on a bench under the fading autumn sun. Her laptop bag sat beside her, unopened. When she saw him, her first instinct was to stand up and leave. But he stopped her. "Please," he said quietly. "Just listen." She crossed her arms. "You've said enough. I was wrong." His voice trembled slightly. "You didn't leak anything. Hargrove did. I found proof." Her expression softened, but she didn't speak. "I hurt you," he continued, "because I thought if I pushed you away, I could protect myself. But all I did was prove that I'm still the coward I was years ago." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted you to see that you weren't alone." He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I see it now. I see you. And I don't want to lose that." The silence between them was heavy, not with tension, but with truth. "Finally," she said softly, "then prove it." Ethan took a deep breath, then reached out, his hand trembling as he brushed a tear from her cheek. "For years, I told myself I didn't believe in love. But maybe I just stopped believing I deserved it." Lena smiled through her tears. "You do." And for the first time in forever, Ethan let his walls crumble completely, as he pulled her into his arms, holding her like the one thing he never wanted to let go again. Morning light poured into the city like hope breaking through clouds. For the first time in months, Ethan Cole woke up with something other than dread in his chest. He had barely slept, but his mind was clear, and his purpose was sharper than ever. Today wasn't just about saving his company. It was about doing what he should have done long ago, standing up for truth, and for the woman who taught him how. By 9 a.m., Cole Enterprises' top floor was alive with tension. Every news channel was tuned to the same story: Ethan Cole's emergency press conference. Reporters crowded the lobby. Cameras flashed. Inside, Ethan stood behind the podium, wearing his trademark gray suit, but this time, his expression wasn't cold. It was human. He looked directly into the cameras. "Good morning. For weeks, I've stayed silent while rumors destroyed my company and reputation. But silence can look like guilt, and I'm done being silent." He paused, letting the room settle. "An internal investigation has revealed that the fraud was orchestrated by my former CFO, Richard Hargrove. He manipulated financial data and forged signatures to make it appear as if I was responsible." A wave of murmurs swept through the reporters. Ethan continued, "We have turned over every piece of evidence to the authorities. Cole Enterprises will cooperate fully with federal investigators. The truth will speak louder than headlines." He glanced down for a moment, at a photo clipped to his notes. It was the one Lena had left behind in his office months ago. Her smile was his anchor now. "And before I close," he said, his tone softer, "there's someone I owe an apology to. Lena Hart, the woman who believed in my integrity when I didn't even believe in myself. I accused her of betrayal when she was the only person fighting for me." The cameras clicked like thunder. "She reminded me that being human isn't weakness. It's courage. So, Lena, if you're watching this, thank you. I don't know if I deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to earn it anyway." He stepped back, leaving reporters speechless. For once, The cold-hearted CEO didn't look untouchable. He looked real. Hours later, the news exploded. Ethan Cole cleared of fraud allegations. Former CFO Hargrove arrested in corporate scandal. Cole Enterprises stock rallies after truth revealed. Lena watched it unfold on her small TV, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Her phone buzzed with hundreds of messages, but she ignored them all, until one came through that made her breath catch. It was from Ethan. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you. Can we meet? Same park. Sunset." Her heart raced. For a moment, she hesitated. After everything, the hurt, the chaos, the heartbreak, was she ready to face him again? Then she remembered the look in his eyes during that press conference. The sincerity. The regret. The man who finally learned to feel. She put on her coat and left. The park was glowing in the soft orange light of sunset. Leaves rustled gently in the breeze as the city hummed in the distance. Ethan was already there, standing by the fountain where they had first talked about dreams. When she approached, he turned and smiled faintly. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," she replied honestly. "But then I realized I wanted to hear what you had to say, in person." He nodded, his eyes searching hers. "I spent years hiding behind numbers and contracts," he began quietly. "They were safe. Predictable. People weren't. Love wasn't." He exhaled. "So I told myself it didn't exist. That it was just an illusion people chased to feel less alone." Lena folded her arms gently. "And now, he said, stepping closer, "I know love is the only thing that ever made me feel alive." She looked away, fighting tears. "You hurt me, Ethan. I know. And I'll spend every day proving that I can be better. Not as a CEO, as a man." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. But instead of opening it, he just held it out to her. "It's not what you think," he said with a soft smile. "It's a key." She blinked. "A key? To my old office," he said. "It's yours now. I want you to lead our new non-profit division, the one you dreamed of starting. You said once that business should have a heart. I didn't understand it then. But now I do." Her eyes widened, emotion breaking through her composure. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything you said," he replied. "Especially the things I was too stubborn to hear." She took the key, her fingers brushing his. For a moment, time stood still. "Ethan," she whispered, "why are you really doing this?" He smiled sadly. "Because you melted the ice I thought would never thaw. You showed me what love looks like, not in words, but in faith." He took her hand gently. "I don't just want you in my company, Lena. I want you in my life. If you'll still have me." Her eyes met his, searching, testing, forgiving. And then, softly, she said, "Only if you promise to believe in love this time." He grinned, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "I already do." Months later, Cole Enterprises was stronger than ever, but the story wasn't about profits anymore. It was about purpose. Lena's new initiative, the Heart Project, funded education for young entrepreneurs across the U.S. Ethan supported it personally, often showing up at small-town schools and talking about second chances. The media called it the redemption of Ethan Cole. But behind closed doors, it wasn't about redemption. It was about gratitude. Every morning, when he walked into his office, he saw Lena's photo on his desk, the same one that once reminded him of his failure. Now, it reminded him of his miracle. One evening, as they stood together overlooking the city skyline, Lena leaned against him and whispered, "Do you still think love doesn't exist?" He chuckled softly, wrapping his arm around her. "Not anymore. In fact, I'm starting to think it's the best investment I ever made." She smiled, eyes glimmering in the city lights. "Finally, something we agree on." He turned to her, their foreheads touching, and whispered, "I don't believe in fairy tales, but I believe in us." And when their lips met, gentle, warm, and certain, it wasn't the ending of their story. It was the beginning of everything they'd both stopped believing in.